We're seeing a lot of cultural apologetics and challenges, with gender issues and things like that. But I think one of the most effective, from the skeptic's position, arguments against God these days is what's called the divine hiddenness objection to God. John Steingart, who was the front man for a Christian rock group called, what was it called? Hawk Nelson.
Yeah.
Remember them?
They're from my area.
Oh,
That's
they
right.
are.
Hawk Nelson. I think pretty sure they're Canadian.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
So
I know
in
some of the
2020,
Steingarts.
he said on Instagram, I've deconstructed my faith.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. He said it was like a sweater where I pulled threads, and then pretty soon there was no sweater left. And he walked away from his faith. He didn't become an atheist, but he walked away from his Christian faith. And I actually did a movie based on one of my books called The Case for Heaven, a documentary, and we interviewed him for that movie. And he talked about this in the movie. And the argument is basically, okay, if God is real, then he would make his existence so obvious to us because he loves us and he wants to have a relationship with us. He wouldn't play hide and seek with us. He would be much more apparent and obvious if that were. And that's an interesting objection. So in my new book, Is God Real? I have a whole chapter where I address this objection. And it's interesting when you think about it because the guy I interviewed, the expert on it, is a guy named Kenneth Samples. And he was an aspiring baseball player. And he was a catcher. And he said, I think of this issue as a pitcher and a catcher, the hiddenness of God. He said, God is the pitcher and I'm the catcher. He said, where is the problem really? Is it with the pitcher or is it with the catcher? And he said, biblically, I would say the problem is with the catcher. And I said, why? He said, because when you look biblically, Romans 1 verse 20, it says that we have enough evidence from nature itself to know that God exists. And in fact, it says the evidence is so strong, we're without excuse. And yet it says that we tend to suppress that. And the Greek imagery there is like a pedal. And so the apparent existence of God creeps up in our life and we push it down like a pedal. And then another time it creeps up again and then we push it down again. And it does it again and again. And so it's like a pedal. We keep suppressing the evidence of God and the truth that God exists. And so he says biblically, I think the problem mainly lies with us. Why? Well, just like Kanye West said recently, I am God. I am the God of me. We want to be God. We don't have room in our life for another God. We don't want there to be another God. Thomas Nagel, the famous atheist philosopher, said, it's not just that I don't believe in God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want to live in a universe that is like that. So we have a tendency to want to be God in our life. And then William Lane Craig had an interesting comment on this. He said,
who you quote in every book, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Or almost every book.
Yeah, for sure. Bill Craig said, God's goal is not for us just to know that he exists. God walks a fine line. He wants to make himself as readily obvious to those who really want to find him, but sufficiently hidden for those that don't want to find him, because he doesn't want to overwhelm us and take away our free will by, overwhelming us with his presence. So Bill Craig said God's goal is not just that we know that he exists, but that we enter into a relationship with him, that we love him, that we follow him, that we have a saving relationship with him. He said even the demons believe that God exists. Doesn't help them. If God made his existence so obvious, like he writes in neon in the sky, I'm here, God is here, whatever, how do we know that more people would come into that kind of a relationship with him? We don't really know. If God is omniscient, he would know the line to walk. He would know how the degree to which make his existence obvious to people so that the maximum number of people would come into that saving relationship. And as one person said to me, he said, look at the times in history where God did make himself as obvious as the nose on your face. I'm thinking of when he dealt with Israel, when he led them through the desert, when he parted the Red Sea. I mean, how much more evidence do you want that God is real? But what happened? Did Israel then fall into line? No, Israel fell into apostasy again. And so there's no guarantee that even if God made himself totally obvious, that we would then follow him and enter into a relationship with him. There's going to be those that, no, I want to be God. I'm God. I'm the God of me. And we will reject him anyway. So there's a lot of dynamics to this. And I have a chapter in my book, Is God Real?, that really kind of goes into depth and looks at this issue of the hiddenness of God. And one of the things that John Steingart admitted in an interview later, he said, this question of God's hiddenness does not negate the other affirmative evidence that God exists. And we have a lot of evidence from science, from philosophy, from history that Christianity is true. And it doesn't negate that. It raises questions and it raises doubts. And many people are wrestling with that. And, I'd encourage them to read that chapter. I think it'll be helpful.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I'm glad you raised the parting of the Red Sea, because I love reading the scripture, not just for the revelation of God and his divineness, but also for the human response.
Yeah.
You could easily make the argument. I'm sure there were some people that day who are like, yeah, we made it through the sea, but there was a strong east wind.
Yeah, right.
Which the scripture actually says there was a strong east wind.
Right.
And then it was just the wind. Or, yeah, we're in the desert, but I remember the, leeks and watermelons and cucumbers. And can we go back? Come on, can we go back to Egypt? And sometimes as a leader, you expect was it Buechner who wrote, imagine that one day in the stars in every language, all the stars align to read in every language known to humanity. I exist, God.
Yeah.
And we'd all stop and we'd all hold our breath for a second. And then someone would go, and?
Yeah.
And we get on with our lives again.
Right.
And it's like, there's a lot of truth to that,
There
right?
There is. And if God wrote in the sky, I'm here, we'd think, wow, look at those airplanes that do the skywriting. Isn't that amazing how they can do that?
Right, yeah.
And we'd find a way to walk the other way if indeed we're motivated by a desire to be our own God.
Or in today's world, the world is round, God. It's like, no, it's not. It's flat.